Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor here, coming at you with another bonus Smarter Science of Slim podcast. And today, everyone, if it's possible, buckle up your seatbelts because you're in for a little bit of a wild ride here. We've got a potentially the most provocative guest we've had on so far, someone who is challenging what has become such an institution in our cultures. We're talking a $50+ billion industry, something that is as common as maybe taking multivitamins, but there's some cracks in the armor. Let's put it that way to be nice, and I'll let our guest Justin Smith talk a lot more about that. But let the cat out of the bag. We've got Justin Smith, the producer of the wonderful film Statin Nation. You can learn more at statinnation.net or just search for it on Facebook. He's based out of London. He is a one-man army out to tell the truth about this medication, which has literally become like Skittles. I mean, it's like a cold medication, and it shouldn't be thought of that way. So thrilled to have Justin on the show. Justin, welcome.
Hi, Jonathan. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Justin, well, let's just get into this, starting with the very beginning in terms of give us a quick overview of what the film is about, why you created it, and the story behind it.
Okay, well, the film challenges the idea of the mass prescription of cholesterol medications, in particular statins. So I very, very strongly believe that these medications have been massively overprescribed, particularly to people who are pretty healthy. They don't have any symptoms or diagnosed heart problems at the moment, but they're being given the medication as a preventative measure. So it's about that, but it's also raising a number of important issues about the whole basis of lowering cholesterol levels. Because when we look at all of the evidence, all of the data, it's very clear that actually we're better off with slightly higher cholesterol levels overall. So there's no real scientific basis for lowering people's cholesterol levels. It's just about making a lot of money for the pharmaceutical industry and for the food industry as well. So that's the basis of the documentary. And it came about, I was working as a nutrition consultant, and I increasingly found it very, very difficult to do my job properly because there are all these nutritional myths, fundamental nutritional myths, that I was spending all of the time in each consultation trying to correct. And I started off with a book. So I wrote a book that was published in 2009 called 29 Billion Reasons to Lie About Cholesterol. And the intention with that was to give to people, to clients in particular, to read in their own spare time so that we could move more quickly and be more productive in the actual consultation time. Well, when I did the research in more detail for the book, I was just horrified to find just how bad the situation had become and the background, all the fundamental problems that exist within medicine. And really the documentary film was a natural progression from the book, with the intention, of course, to try and get the information out to a much wider audience.
Well, and Justin, this is such a pervasive thing. I mean, I'm very familiar with the research as well, certainly not to the extent that you are. And it is the thing that scares me the most is this is not controversial. Like, if you actually look at the literature and if you actually understand even rudimentary biology, it's clear that this paradigm is wrong. And certainly there may be a role for statins, but in very fringe cases, not the way they're currently being used. So given the fact that the evidence is clear, given the fact that the biology is clear, what is going on? Like, how can we reverse this, or what can we do about this?
Well, I think the only way that we can reverse this is sort of from grassroots level upwards. So by ordinary people becoming aware of the issue and then going to their doctor and raising these important points with their doctor. And then eventually, if we can achieve this critical mass of people, particularly in the US and the UK, that are aware of the issue, then that will eventually force a change in government healthcare policy. But of course, it's an incredibly difficult task. But we are making steps in the right direction. The problem, I think, is that the pharmaceutical companies have such an influence over the whole medical system that we're not going to get a policy change that will filter down to the general public. It has to come from the general public upwards, because the pharmaceutical companies do about 80% of all the research now. Of course, they are going to direct the research so that the results come out to be favorable to their products that they're trying to sell to us. And then they do all kinds of things to misrepresent the scientific evidence to doctors. So doctors are almost, if you like, brainwashed into believing that they need to lower their patients' cholesterol levels. And that goes all the way through medical school and continues through their continuing education. So when a patient goes to see their doctor, having done some research, it's very difficult for the patient to get a really positive response from the doctor, because the doctor has been, as I say, almost brainwashed into believing this about cholesterol.
And Justin, that's such two things I want to dig into. One is how we can equip people to have this conversation with their doctor. Actually, three things. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how certainly for individuals who are hearing this right now and are just like, wait, what? I need, like, this just sounds like heresy. Please watch Justin's film, Statin Nation, statination.net. Don't want to get into that on this call because it's certainly a full-length film and we wouldn't do justice to it. So watch the film. It's profound and it will give you the insight you need. But Justin, one thing I want to make sure we cover is there may be some alarm bells going off in listeners' heads talking about, conspiracy theory. Oh, this sounds like a conspiracy theory. And just really quickly, I want to dispel that and just like, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's common sense. The pharmaceutical industry is not necessarily a bunch of evil people sitting in a room thinking about how to kill as many people as possible. However, they are in the business of making money. And if they're in the business of making money, coming up with convincing those who prescribe medication that an expensive medication such as a statin should be used preventatively globally is an incredibly profitable thing to do. So it is in their interest. Remember, their interest is not our health. It's not because they're evil. It's just because that's not their interest. Their interest is in making money, and this is a very effective way to make money. The only people interested in our health is us. And that's why Justin put this film together, and that's why we need to talk about how we can ensure our cholesterol health. And Justin, how do we do that with our doctors?
Well, just very briefly, just to reinforce what you just said about how this has come about. Yes, the pharmaceutical company, as you absolutely correctly say, their objectives are completely different to our personal objectives of achieving good health. And of course, they have an increasing pressure every year to generate more profit for shareholders. And a number of years ago, the pharmaceutical model, if you like, was suffering in that they were failing to come up with new medications that genuinely helped people. And so as a business, they looked at that problem and decided what they needed to do was to get more people to take the medications that they have already approved, that's already out there in the marketplace. And so they did actually move some of the resources from research and development into the marketing department. And that's one of the ways that they've continued to generate more and more profit. So I think one of the tools, certainly that I'm trying to make available for ordinary people to go and talk to their doctor about, is a fact sheet that I'm going to put together and put available from the website statinnation.net. And this will include some of the key points with the references to the scientific literature. So an ordinary patient will be able to go and talk to their doctor about this with some of the key points like, how come none of the clinical trials have shown any life extension for the vast majority of people who take statin medications? And some of the evidence, the key points about the side effects of statin medications that are really played down, they're routinely played down in the media and within some of the journals. So I think if people are equipped with these key points and key questions that they can take to their doctor, then that would help to create more of an impact.
Well, and Justin, that's brilliant. I'm so happy you're going to have that fact sheet, because literally, like, putting that on a refrigerator, taking that to our doctor will be so helpful. But in the meantime, if I have a doctor's appointment next week, or if I'm tomorrow morning waking up and taking my statin medication, what are some of the things, like who should be taking statin medications and who shouldn't be, and how do we accurately make that distinction?
Well, in medical terms, this is described in terms of primary prevention and secondary prevention. So primary prevention is all of the people who take a statin to try and prevent a future heart problem. 75% of all the people who take statin around the world. And all of the clinical trials have shown there's no extension in life expectancy when people take a statin for primary prevention. When we come to secondary prevention, that's people who have an existing heart problem. They've been diagnosed with a heart problem of some kind or other. There is an argument that some people make for taking a statin in that situation. And it's really difficult to say at the moment whether the statin would be beneficial or not. It's one of those things that really has to be judged on the individual level with the person's doctor. But we do know that within the secondary prevention population, it tends to be just middle-aged men who tend to benefit from taking the statin. One of the reasons for that is as we get older, there's a very strong correlation between low cholesterol levels and a reduced life expectancy. So even if the statins benefit middle-aged men who have already had a heart attack, then they don't benefit people who have already had a heart attack who are older than that. But that's the secondary prevention is a much more complicated discussion to have, people should have with their doctor. It's the primary prevention people, the 75% of people who are taking the medication for so-called prevention that are not benefiting and really should think seriously about whether they should be taking a statin medication at all.
Well, and Justin, one thing that I think is a great thing to talk about here is sometimes we may hear, well, people think to themselves, well, okay, I'm taking statin medication, but it sounds like there may be some negative side effects. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, that that's actually maybe the wrong mental model, because we need to just rejigger the way our minds are working about this in general. Like anytime you take a medication of any sort, including statins, there's no such thing as side effects. There's just effects. And some of them are quote unquote desirable, some are marketed, and some aren't. And when you take a statin, Justin can certainly talk more about this, you essentially stop a bunch of processes in your body, many of which, if not most of which, are required for good health and are intentionally taking place. So these are not side effects. This is the effect of statins. And whether or not that's a good thing is really being called into question. And that's why I really appreciate Justin's work. So Justin, can you talk a little bit about what statins actually do and why we should be suspicious that the effects are in any way, shape, or form beneficial for the vast majority of us?
Absolutely. Well, let's take the most important effect first of all, in that they lower cholesterol levels. They do, of course, lower cholesterol levels, and they do that very well. But that is actually an adverse effect of the medication because of this strong correlation between low cholesterol levels and a reduced life expectancy. But also, if we look at what cholesterol is used for within the body, we start to get an understanding why it's probably not a good idea to start to lower these levels. So it's used for the raw material for the production of vitamin D within the body. It's used for all of the steroidal hormones, so testosterone, cortisol, and the others. It's used as a raw material for the bile acids used for the digestion of fats. The cholesterol is a major part of the cell membrane, so the outer skin, if you like, of every single cell within the body, within the human body. So our bodies are made up of something like 50 trillion cells. And every one of those cells, the outer skin of it, a large portion of that is actually made from cholesterol. And we've known for a long time that the cholesterol in that skin or membrane of the cell is incredibly important because it provides the structural rigidity for the cell to be protected from its external environment. So we've known that for a very long time. But increasingly, more recently, we're finding new studies to show that the cholesterol is actually involved in the actual intelligence of the cell. So it's being used as part of the cellular signaling processes that take place within the cell. And we also know that certain cells within the body they require more cholesterol. So this would be brain cells, cells associated with the nervous system, and the immune system as well. So when we reduce the availability of cholesterol within the body through taking statin medications, all of these important parts of the body are going to suffer. And that's why really the effects are in many ways unpredictable, and any part of the body can be affected. And there's a great document produced by G from greenmedinfo.com, and he's documented more than 300 adverse effects that we know are caused by statins. But the most common adverse effects are, as we would expect, problems to do with the brain, the nervous system, the immune system, and muscles as well. So muscle aches and pains is the most common adverse effect. But that can go all the way from a mild problem all the way to people who can't, unfortunately, actually walk anymore because it's so severe. And there's also evidence that, unfortunately, this statin damage, as some people call it, can continue when someone has stopped taking the medication as well. It can be so severe that it continues after stopping taking the medication. So really, although it's true that, of course, any medication has a range of effects and we have to balance the adverse effects against the positive effects, but because statins have this profound effect on the body, it's almost ridiculous that they were ever conceived as a medication in the first place.
Well, and Justin, I think that's the key distinction. Is certainly there's always a cost benefit, and we're not here to say modern medicine is evil and blah blah blah. That's not what we're here to say. But what we're here to say is there should be a conscious weighing of the potential positives of a treatment and the potential negatives. An example, which may be a little over the top, but I think drives the point home, is chemotherapy. Right? Like chemotherapy is terrible. It's basically like napalming your body. It's like, let's kill everything for the hopes that the cancer cells will also die, and then hopefully the cells we need will come back. That we know is a treatment we only use as a last resort because its effects are so deleterious globally. I think statins are kind of in that same camp, where do they have a role? Yeah, but only in this very, very corner case because, like you said, they are fundamentally changing this core function in our body, and that can have widespread effects.
I think that's a good analogy. Yes, because, again, as part of the whole picture for all of the effects, we know that statins also can reduce the amount of inflammation. And we know that inflammation is the key part of heart disease. So that's a positive effect of the medication. But when you balance that against the profound effect it can have on all of the body cells and the way it blocks the production of a number of nutrients as well within the body, then for the average person who doesn't have a severe heart problem, the adverse effects are going to be much worse than the positive effects. But when you have someone who unfortunately has already had a heart attack and they are at a very high risk, very, very high risk of having another heart attack in the near future, then the positive effect of the statin, the reduction in the inflammation and maybe some stabilization of the plaque as well, that could be more important for them as an individual at the moment than the whole range of the negative effects. So yes, I think you're absolutely right.
And the thing that is so unfortunate about all of this is how just misinformed we've been. I mean, we can't tell the whole story here. Certainly we don't have time, but literally, we're told, for example, like going all the way back, don't eat fat because fat raises your cholesterol and cholesterol is bad for you. So eat a high starch, high sugar, low fat, low protein, standard Western diet. And that is the diet which actually causes a negative cholesterol profile. That is the diet that causes the inflammation that actually causes the arterial clogging, which people thought or are told is caused by cholesterol, but is not. The buildup of cholesterol is actually an effect of the inflammation, which is an effect of the diet we've been told to eat. So then we're prescribed statins, which just breaks everything else on top of that, where at the end of the day, if we just ate things we could find directly in nature, none of this would be a problem. None of it all just goes away, and there's no side effects to that. In fact, it's just brilliant for us.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, one of the fundamental points is that we've been led to believe that we think about fats in our diet in terms of we eat those fats and they end up as fats floating around in our bloodstream. And of course, that's not true at all. In fact, the opposite is true. When we avoid fat and we have too much carbohydrate and too many sugars, the excess carbohydrate and sugar, of course, is converted into glucose in the bloodstream. And that glucose is very quickly converted into triglycerides, which are the fats in the bloodstream. So what we find is people who follow a low-fat diet with too much carbohydrate and sugars, their blood fats are much, much higher than people who follow a higher fat, more sensible diet.
Yeah, it's literally like, I don't know if this analogy is going to work, so I'm spitballing it here, but if your goal is to avoid lung cancer, the last thing you would do is smoke more and then hope some medication would come along that would downregulate or avert the consequences of smoking on your respiratory system. If our goal is to avoid heart problems, the last thing we should do is eat more low-fat starches and sweets, because they're a bit like smoking is to our lungs, to our cardiovascular system, and then hope that some medication will miraculously undo that damage. It doesn't work that way.
Absolutely, yes. And of course, there are all kinds of other implications of having these higher blood glucose levels caused by a low-fat diet. The high level of blood glucose actually prevents the arteries from widening. So it actually restricts the blood flow to the heart. And it, as you mentioned earlier, it also causes inflammation, which we know is the key feature of heart disease. So whichever way you look at it, the low-fat diet is more likely to cause heart disease.
And one thing I think that's important to call out, Justin, is it sounds like we're coming out against low-fat diets, and people, what they may hear is, okay, well, what about all these studies that show that individuals who ate higher fat diets had a higher incidence of heart issues? The key distinction I think we need to make there, and you can certainly speak more to this, is the type of fats that are being consumed, right? If you're consuming processed unnatural fats, and you're doing that in conjunction with a diet that is also high in starches and sweets. So essentially you're eating what I would call insane foods that have unhealthy fats as well as unnatural processed starches and sweets. That is horrible. That's like the worst possible combination of things, because you're eating bad everything. What we're talking about doing is eating healthy fats, eating healthy carbohydrates, and eating healthy proteins. Like that's what you should do. And you don't need to worry about low this or high that. You just need to eat food. What say you?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely agree. And I think also I certainly end up talking in those terms, sort of, it sounds like I'm criticizing a low-fat diet, but really I'm just trying to restore some balance into the discussion, because we've been brainwashed and told continuously that we need to avoid this fat. And that's so disproportionate that we're trying to bring things back to more of sort of a middle ground. And the other important point, of course, is individuality. So one person may need something like 30% protein and fat in their diet. Another person might need 70%. So there's a huge variation between different people. But as long as the most important thing, as you've mentioned, is to stick to the natural foods as much as possible. The good quality proteins, meat, poultry, seafood, eggs, with vegetables and some amount of fruit.
And oh, go ahead, Justin. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Just yes, and staying away from as much of the processed food as possible.
And that's really, I think, a key point, Justin, because if you actually look at least in the States, that the typical ratio of macronutrients consumed, it's not actually like we're told to eat a low-fat diet, but the average American at least isn't. We're eating a moderate, if not a higher fat diet, but it's the source of the fats, right? It's these processed seed oils. So eating a diet that is higher in these fats, which are terrible for you, like there's no question, they're unnatural. The body's not designed to handle them. They're as bad for you as processed starches and sweets, if not worse, because they literally break your brain's ability to regulate your body naturally. That is in no way, shape, or form the same as eating a diet which contains whole foods such as high-quality meats, seafoods, nuts, things like cocoa, coconut. Like that is literally day and night from what those substances do to your body. Just like spinach is primarily carbohydrate and so is sugar. Like we get that a diet high in spinach is not the same as a diet high in sugar. A diet which is 35% processed seed oils is not the same as a diet that is 35% whole food natural fats at all. So anytime you hear anyone criticizing the consumption of fat, or you see any study which criticizes the consumption of fat, the first thing to do is look at where the fat is coming from. Because of course, unhealthy sources of fat are bad for you. But that's a key distinction for us to make.
Yes, absolutely.
So Justin, in terms of immediate next steps, what would you say what are like the 3 takeaways you would say that we should all leave with from this conversation?
Well, one of the most important points is that statin medications do not benefit people who don't have a diagnosed heart problem. And there's no correlation between the level of cholesterol in the bloodstream and a person's risk for heart disease at all. And the third thing is all that what we've just been talking about just sticking to a natural, wholesome diet. And really, we would be better off not even knowing our cholesterol levels, I think, because that it creates so much anxiety and of course the medication, the risk of being prescribed the medications, that we would be better just leading a healthier life with good quality nutrition.
And that's really the key point there, Justin. I love that. And it's this, in some ways, the harder we're trying, the unhealthier we are. And we're taking these medications where we're trying to manually regulate our cholesterol levels. We're trying to manually count calories. And the only reason those are even issues we've become conscious of is because our bodies have lost the ability to automatically regulate us, to keep us in a state of homeostasis, to balance us out as they're designed to, right? They're designed to keep us healthy. And why has that happened? It's because we're eating the wrong types of foods. Like being healthy and being slim becomes so simple. It may not be easy because we're surrounded by all this processed garbage, but it's so simple when we just feed our body that which it was designed to eat, which is stuff you can find in nature, and enable it to automatically regulate our energy balance, our cholesterol levels, our sodium levels, our potassium levels, right? Like we can't possibly consciously monitor all of this stuff. And every time we try to, we just make things worse. Statins are a perfect example. So I really, really appreciate all the work you've been doing, Justin. So individuals who want to learn more about this, and really it should be everyone at this point, because if you, the listener, are not on a statin medication, you certainly know someone who is, please check out statinnation.net. Justin's work is amazing. Justin, when can we expect that fact sheet to be available?
I think within 2 weeks.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Well, actually, by the time this airs, that will be available. So definitely go to statinnation.net. Check out that fact sheet. Check out Justin's film. And Justin, I just wanted to salute you and thank you, because this is certainly not an easy thing to do. You're up against a multi-billion-dollar industry, but it's certainly a noble motive, and I can only imagine the number of lives you're improving and, frankly, saving. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks very much for all of your wonderful work as well.
All right, wonderful. Well, hey, thank you so much, Justin, for being with us. And listeners, I hope this has been helpful for you. Again, always remember to chat with your doctor, but also take the power into your own hands and do some research on your own. Check out Justin's work. Have a wonderful week, and remember to eat more and exercise less, but do that smarter. Have a good one.
Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would hugely appreciate it.